Of Mice and Men, Section 1, Part 1. 1. A few miles south of Soledad, the Salian River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water's warm too, for it slipped twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Gabilan Mountains. But on the valley side, the water is lined with trees, willows, fresh and green with every spring, carrying in their lower leaf junctures the debris of the winter's flooding, the sycamores with molted white recumbent limbs, and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank under the tree, the leaves lie deep and so crisp, the lizard makes a great skittering if he runs among them. Rabbits come out of the brush to sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with night tracks of coons, and with spread paths of dogs from the ranches, and with split-wedged tracks of deer that come to drink in the dark. There's a path through the willows among the sycamores, a path beaten hard by boys coming down from the ranches to swim in the deep pool, and beaten hard by tramps who come wearily down from the highway in the evening to jungle up near water. In front of the low horizontal limb of a great sycamore is an ash pile made by many fires. The limb is worn smooth by men who sit on it. Evening of a hot day started the little wind moving among the leaves. The shade climbed up the hills toward the top. On the sandbanks, the rabbits sat as quietly as little grey sculptured stones, and then from the direction of the state highway came the sound of footsteps on crisp sycamore leaves. The rabbit hurried noisily for cover. A stilted heron laboured up into the air, pounding down the river. For a moment the place was lifeless, and two men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. They'd walked in single file down the path, and even in the open one stayed behind the other. Both were dressed in denim trousers and in denim coats with brass buttons. Both wore black, shapeless hats, and both carried tight blanket robes slung over their shoulders. The first was sharp and strong features, short. Every part of him was defined. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large pale eyes, with wide sloping shoulders, and he walked heavily, dragging his feet a little, the way a bear drags his paws. His arms did not swing at his sides, but hung loosely. The first man stopped short in the clearing. The follower nearly ran over him. He took off his hat and wiped the sweat band with his forefinger and snapped the moisture off. His huge companion dropped his blankets and flung himself down and drank from the surface of the green pool, drunk with long gulps, snorting into the water like a horse. A small man stopped nervously behind him. "Lennie," he said. "Lennie, for God's sake, don't drink so much." Lennie continued to snort into the pool. The small man leaned over and shook him by the shoulder. "Lennie, you're going to be sick like you were last night." Lennie dipped his whole head under, hat and all, and then he sat up on the bank and his hat dripped down his blue coat and ran down his back. "That's good," he said. "You drink some, George. You take a good big drink." He smiled happily. George unslung his bindle and dropped it gently on the bank. "I ain't sure it's good water," he said. "Looks kind of scummy." Then he dabbled his paw into the water and wiggled his fingers so the water rose in small splashes. Rings widened across the pool to the other side and come back again. Lennie watched them go. "Look, George, look what I done." George knelt beside the pool and drank from his head with quick scoops. "Tastes all right," he admitted. "Don't really seem to be running, though. You never ought to drink water when it ain't running, Lennie," he said, hopelessly. "You drink out of a gutter if you're thirsty." He threw a scoop of water into his face, and rubbed it about with his hand, under his chin and around the back of his neck. Then he replaced his hat, pushed himself back from the river, drew up his knees, embraced them. Lennie, who had been watching, imitated George exactly. He pushed himself back and drew up his knees, embraced them, looked over at George. We had just had it right. He pulled down his hat down a little more over his eyes, the way George's hat was. George stared morosely at the water. The rims of his eyes were red with sun glare. He said angrily, "We could have just as well have rode clear to the ranch if that busted bus driver knew what he's talking about. Just a little stretch down the highway," he says. "Just a little stretch. Goddamn near 4 miles, that's what it was. Didn't want to stop at the ranch gate, that's why. Too goddamn lazy to pull up. Wonder if he isn't too goddamn to stop in Soledad at all." Kicks his ass and says, "Just a little stretch down the road." I bet it was more than 4 miles, damn hot day. Lennie looked timidly over to George. "George?" "Yeah, what do you want?" "Where are we going, George?" The little man jerked down the brim of his hat and scowled over at Lennie. "So you forgot that already, did you? I gotta tell you, do I? Jesus Christ, you crazy bastard." "I forgot," Lennie said. "I tried not to forget. Honest to God, I did, George." Okay. I'll tell you what. I ain't got nothing to do. Might just as well spend all my time telling you things and you forget 'em. And I tell you again." Tried," said Lennie, "but it did no good. I remember all the rabbits, George." "The hell with the rabbits. That's all you ever remember is them rabbits." "Okay, now you listen this time. You gotta remember that we don't get in no trouble. You remember sitting off in the gutter on Howard Street and watching the backboard?" And his face broke into a delighted smile. "Why, sure, George, I remember that. But what do we do then? I remember some girls come by, and you say, the hell with what I say. You remember us going into Murray and Reddy's to get some work cards and bus tickets?" "Oh, sure, George, I remember that now." His hands went quickly into his side pockets. He said gently, "George, I ain't got mine. I must have lost it." He looked down at the ground in despair. "You never had none, you crazy bastard. I got both of them here. Think I'd let you carry your own work card?" Then he grinned with himself. "I thought I put it in my side pocket." His hand went into the pocket again. George looked sharply at him. "Why did you take it out of the pocket?" "I ain't a thing in my pocket," Lennie said cleverly. "I know they ain't. You got it in your hand. What you got in your hand hiding it?" "I ain't got nothing, George, honest." "Come on, give it here." Lennie held his close hand away from George's direction. "It's only a mouse, George." "A mouse? A live mouse?" "Uh-huh. Just a dead mouse, George. I didn't kill it, honest. I found it. I found it dead." "Give it here," said George. "Oh, let me have it, George. Give it here." Lennie's closed hand slowly obeyed. George took the mouse and threw it across the pool to the other side among the brush. "What do you want a dead mouse, anyways?" "I could pet it with my thumb while we walked along," said Lennie. "Well, you ain't petting no mice till we're walking with me. Remember where we're going now?" Lennie looked startled, then in embarrassment hid his face against his knees. "I forgot again." "Jesus Christ," George said resentfully. "Well, look, we're gonna work on a ranch like the one we came up from north." "Up north?" "In Weed." "Oh, sure, I remember in Weed. The ranch we're going to is right down there, about a quarter mile. We're gonna go in and see the boss. Now look, I'll give him the work tickets, but you ain't gotta say a word. Just stand there and don't say nothing. If he finds out what a crazy bastard you are, you ain't got no job. But he sees your work before he hears your talk. We're set. You got that?" "Sure, George. Sure, I got it." "Now, when we going to see the boss, what are you gonna do?" I Lennie thought. His face grew tight with thought. "I ain't gonna say nothing. Just gonna stand there." "Good boy. That's swell. We say that over 2-3 times, so you sure won't forget it." Lennie droned to himself. "I ain't gonna say a word. I ain't gonna say a word. I ain't gonna say a word. I ain't gonna say nothing."